Welcome back to a Saturday edition of On Texas Football. I'm CJ Vogel, joined by Gerry Hamilton. And Gerry, I don't know about you, but I've been glued to this Texas roster since it was released yesterday. It's one of my favorite times of the year. Every semester we get the updates going into the fall and in the spring camp. It's just one of those times for guys like me to nerd out about the heights and the weights and the changes and the numbers. It's very exciting for me. It's kind of the signal of spring football starting, and here we are. About 12 days out from the first day of spring football, 11 days actually. And so we're really getting close. But I wanted to start with this. It's a lot of new faces on campus, specifically with this early enrollee freshman class. Who stood out to you? Which of these early guys were those really standing off to you whenever you were checking this roster?
Yeah, I thought the initial height weight of Ryan Wingo at 6'2", 208 was big. Colin Simmons at 234 pounds, I believe it was, or 233. I thought that was big because that is up about 15 pounds, maybe close to 20 pounds from right into the senior season. Alex January at 6'5", 324, a reshaped 324 from what we hear. And then, you look at a kid like Jordan Johnson-Rebel, the weight he's put on to a compact safety frame. And then Christian Clark, CJ, that was the other one because, he left Arizona high school ball or left Arizona high school in December, about 195, 200 pounds, and he's listed at 210. And that doesn't surprise me. He's stacked on some good weight immediately because he's not from a high school program in Texas or the Atlanta area, where the kids are really physically developed. And so those are the ones that caught my attention. How about you?
Yeah, Ryan Wingo was one. Actually, I wanted to go with Xavier Phil-Sami, 190. We've talked about his kind of freakish athleticism that we've seen so far in winter conditioning. We've heard a lot about him so far. I'd like to see him closer to 200. I know Derek Williams last year played in that low 190s range. Not necessarily going to be asked to be that hard-hitting guy I think he can develop into. He has the physical tools to do so. But for a guy like Xavier Phil-Sami, I'd love to see him kind of get up in that 200, 205 range by the time that we really start seeing him on the field for a heavy rotation. I also really liked what I saw from Daniel Cruz at 307 coming in at that center position. You talk about SEC ready, and we mentioned it on the Longhorn live stream on Friday. That's impressive to come in at that size already.
Yeah, so just to think about this, Daniel Cruz is a rare 4-year varsity starter on the offensive line at the 5A or 6A level in Texas. That doesn't happen a lot. Texas had 2 of those in this class, by the way, Nate Kibble and Daniel Cruz. But the difference between Kibble and Cruz is 6'3", 307. I mean, he's literally, and you don't say this about many offensive linemen, CJ, coming out of high school. He was Power 5 ready physically at the offensive line position. That's just very rare. Think about how much weight Brandon Baker's gained in a short amount of time. So Daniel Cruz, 6'3", 307. It's all muscle and it's all anger when it hits you. So a great frame for Texas to continue to build on. But, he's not that far. Probably 315 is going to be his playing weight.
Yeah. That's exactly what Jake Majors is currently at and has been at over the last couple of seasons as well. Gerry, I want to throw one more name at you because I kind of classify him as one of your early enrollee darlings that we've talked about. Jordan Washington coming in at 6'4", 240.
Great call.
Tremendous measurables early as an early enrollee. But I wanted to pose it this way. For folks who aren't familiar with Jordan Washington, they know the basketball background. We know how that kind of translates at the tight end position. For that tight end spot, you kind of classify as a guy that can stretch the field vertically and kind of make those big down the field plays that we've seen, or an inline kind of guy that we've seen with Gunnar Helm as of late. Where does Jordan Washington stack up? Can we see him kind of get the best of both worlds there?
Yeah, I think he will be that guy because Todd Thompson, the head coach at Langham Creek, former fullback at Rice, physical football player in his day, he demanded Jordan be a part of the blocking scheme in the run game at Langham Creek. He didn't just split him out wide and let him run go routes. That's not what he did. Todd Thompson at Langham Creek helped his development. And I think that senior year development, being asked to be that blocker, whether you line up in line or whether you line up off the line, but he asked him to do several different things in the blocking scheme. I think that's going to help Jordan big time. And Jordan, look, he's a bigger frame guy than JT Sanders, right? I mean, you're talking about a guy who's going to be 6'4", 6'4 and a half, 255, maybe even 260 pounds one day when all's said and done, with that ability to go down the seam and make contested catches with really good body control. I think he's one of the higher upside prospects in a top 5 recruiting class, and that's saying something.
Yeah. So the early enrollees, again, just one more reason to be super excited and anxious and, anticipatory of this spring season coming up for the Longhorns. But there's a number of guys who were on the roster last year that have also made big body changes. I mean, we'll get to the offensive line here in a second, but I think the number one guy that we have to talk about is Savion Red. And then we can talk about Anthony Hill and go down the list from there. But Savion Red at 5'10", 240 pounds. My goodness.
And we know 5'10's a stretch. So let's say he's 5'9 and a quarter, 240. I mean, I don't know if he starts rolling downhill, you don't want to be in front of him. That's all I got to say. I mean, that is a boulder coming downhill, right? They put up fencing in Colorado by freeways to keep those guys from hitting cars. I mean, that's what you're talking about. He's a boulder. And I'm so interested to see not only what he looks like physically at 5'9 and a quarter, 240 next week, but how small does Jarrett Gibson at 5'10, 210 look standing next to him?
Yeah, that's a great.
I mean, that's going to be something to see. And is Savion Red now saying, I'm going to become the short yardage back? This is what I'm going to be while I'm at the University of Texas? Or is it all good weight? I think we're going to find out here shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to go to that linebacker position because there's been some movement. Obviously, Jalen Ford departing. Who's going to be that guy? Anthony Hill coming in at 243. Impressive. We know the athleticism is going to be there. He was a 5-star prospect for a reason. But then you start looking at the other pieces around him, and things get a little interesting. Kendrick Blackshear coming in from Alabama, 260 pounds. That's a big boy coming downhill. We don't expect him to be too much involved in that passing game or on passing downs at the moment. But also David Benda, pushing 240, eclipsed that mark as well. Yeah. Texas is really beefing up at that linebacker spot, almost in a way that they're knowing that they're going to have to be a bigger part of the run game with Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat having departed for the NFL.
I think it's a great point, CJ. I think the size, the combination of having to be a bigger factor in the run game and moving to the SEC, more is going to be required. And what's going to be great for these linebackers is you get an SEC warm-up week 2 up in Ann Arbor, because that's pretty much an SEC team. That's what Jim Harbaugh had built at Michigan to get over the hump. And big guys up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage. But that Michigan offensive line, they lost 6 guys, but they're going to be big and really talented. So that Texas linebacker group, I think it's a huge spring for the younger guys too, CJ. Like Leon Galafal's lost some weight according to the roster, but Kendrick Blackshear 261. I mean, Maurice Blackwell's up to 219. He came out of high school in the 193, 195 range, right? So he's finally getting there. With the weight to get up to around 225, which is what I think is about what his max out will be. But Anthony Hill, 15 pounds heavier than when he reported to Texas, 243 now versus 234 on the roster last year, but 228 when he reported. This is a linebacker crew that has good length with Anthony Hill, Leon Galafal, Maurice Blackwell, but then they also have physicality. I mean, Kendrick Blackshear is going to be a role player, but he can fill an important role, and that's, snaps from B gap to B gap and coming downhill and really being a factor in the run game, taking on an offensive lineman at the second level and redirecting that running back. I mean, those are big things in the SEC, because Texas is going to face Michigan, Georgia, Kentucky. They're going to face some teams that are going to say, okay, we're going to line up, probably Arkansas. We're going to line up and we're going to try to run it at you, Texas. Yeah. What do you have? And Texas will face that more than they have in the past. So I really like where this linebacker crew's headed physically.
Yeah, I liked what you said there. Let's put it in perspective a little bit. Again, Kendrick Blackshear, 261 pounds. That is basically a defensive end coming full speed at you from 5 yards beyond.
He weighs more than Baron Sorrell.
Exactly where I was headed with that. That is exactly where Texas is looking to have him in this defense, in those short yardage, kind of big time running situations that we'll see in the fall in the SEC. You got to have guys like that, and Texas went out, found a guy, and did exactly that. But Jerry, I wanted to flip to the offensive side, and we're going to the quarterbacks because of course, it's Quinn Ewers, it's Arch Manning. Now it's Trey Owens in the fold as well. But again, another offseason, another discussion about Quinn Ewers' weight, this time added 10 pounds up to 205 from 195 a year ago. Great weight. Good weight. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, and I've been told a few times, we mentioned it on ontexasfootball.com and on the YouTube channel here, that he went from 210 to 195, right? And I've been told that he was gaining good weight, the strength now that he had stripped off the bad weight, got him through last season. Now he's adding the muscle to his frame. And that's so big for him, not only for his final year at Texas, but in the eyes of the NFL scouts. He's about to throw at Pro Day March 20th. He's listed at 205 now. He's going to be 210 from everybody I talked to at the start of the season, and that's going to be a more physically looking 210 pounds versus some of the bad weight he was carrying before. And so that's going to be so big this season. You don't want, if he's taking a lot of hits, that means offensive line hadn't had a good year in the SEC, first of all. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But more for his NFL draft stock is the way he's viewed, because right now he's viewed as a guy who hadn't stayed healthy for 2 years. Very talented, but he struggled health-wise. Now a stronger body. Those NFL scouts see that here coming up in 12 days or 11 days at the Pro Day. That's big for Quinn Ewers. It's big for Texas because the stronger you are, the more confidence you have.
Exactly. Too. And I got to be careful with the way that I phrase this, but 2023, it was kind of a frail frame from Quinn Ewers, and we saw the result of that, taking on a hit from a linebacker while scrambling. You're out for a couple games. In the SEC, that's a big difference of not having your starting quarterback. But Arch Manning, the guy behind him, 6'4", 220, on paper, again, looks like everything you want in a backup quarterback, an eventual starter. He's checking all the boxes right now. And again, it's not even just the height and weight. Beyond this, behind the scenes, Arch is pushing all the right buttons. He's in this. He's active, generating throwing sessions, everything that you want to see, keeping his head down and working, as we've seen. Really encouraging stuff there. And then Trey Owens as well, 236. He was at 238 in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl, kind of trimming down about 230, I think is where the staff wants him before they, again, start building up that good weight and good muscle. Jerry, is there anything else at this quarterback spot that you really start standing out before we get to the guys that protect them up front?
No, I think you pretty much covered it all. I think the thing with Arch Manning is how athletic he is at 220 pounds. And people are going to see that more in the spring game this year, and probably some clips, some TV or video clips during spring practice. But people are going to see guys that Power 5 assistant coach coined him slick, meaning you're kind of a sneaky athlete. With NFL size at the quarterback position. So that's as good a compliment as somebody can give Arch Manning right now is he's slick. He moves slick at 6'4", 220. That's where you want to be as a quarterback.
Yeah. And so as a quarterback, it certainly helps having the guys in front of you protect. And that's where we're headed next, because my goodness, Texas has some big boys up front, starting with Cam Williams coming in at 360. He's kind of that guy that you're expecting to take over that right tackle spot. Obviously, there will be a battle there, but you can look at the guy right to his left, DJ Campbell, losing 10 pounds. Really important for him, playing a little bit overweight last year, around 340, right above that range. Yeah. You'd like to see him in that 325, 330 area. He can play at that area. Let's not get it twisted. We saw it last year. But if you look across the board at that Texas offensive line, a lot of beef, and that's really impressive going into the SEC. What do you think of DJ Campbell specifically?
I love the drop of 10, 12, 15 pounds, whatever it ended up being. He was 343 on the official roster, 332 on the last year, 332 now. So that's a drop of 11 pounds on the roster. I think it's probably more like 14, 15 in reality. But look, I expect him to make one of the biggest year 2 jumps. A jump from last year to this year of any player on the Texas roster. I kind of have DJ Campbell, Derek Williams coin there right now. I think Jere Bledsoe may fit his way into that. I'm a little worried if that's about Sadir, if that weight's right on the roster, honestly. Yeah. But I do think DJ Campbell is about to have kind of a breakout year, maybe nationally, because he was a 5-star guy coming out. He had a big transition from Arlington Bowie playing left tackle and D tackle to playing interior offensive line at a big-time level. He started every game last year, was injured a little bit early in the season, but I expect him to be one of the big year 2 jumps for the Texas program next year. Love the way
that would be huge, right next to a first-time starter with Cam Williams.
He needs to play well. To your point, yes. CJ, he needs to play well, because for this offense to maximize, Sark can't be worried about how much help he has to give Cam Williams and DJ Campbell in pass protection. If he has to give those guys a lot of help, That's going to take away one of those really athletic options that he wants to mix into the passing game.
Yeah, that's a great point. No handcuffs on the offensive line, especially when you're returning 4 out of 5, and the other one has a top 25 start under his belt as well. But that leads me to my next point, because this is really impressive to me. The way that Kyle Flood has emphasized the hashtag big humans, as we've seen under his tenure. The average Texas weight on the starting 5 is 331.2 pounds. You got 324, 325, 315, 332, and then 360 at right tackle. Jerry, moving to the SEC, you got to have some big boys up front. We know that's to be the case. At that 331 average pound weight for the Texas starting offensive line, that would be the second heaviest in the SEC from the 2023 season, according to Alabama.com, AL.com. Alabama would be number 1, 340 pounds almost. They got some big humans. We understand that that's kind of been the concept that Nick Saban likes to use. But Texas would fall right in there, and they would be 6 pounds heavier than third place team, 10 pounds heavier than fourth place.
So some people would say, well, look, are Texas guys too big? Is Cam Williams too big? Well, you just illustrated it. Alabama was a playoff team last year. Texas was a playoff team last year. Yeah. I think Georgia 2-3 years ago, offensive line was probably in the 325 average, right? Yeah. Obviously won a couple of national championships. So while I do think if there were 3 guys on the offensive line, 350 plus, you could say, whoa, now, but they have 1 guy at Cam Williams at 360. He'll probably be closer to 355 by the season. But after that, it's all about in that 330 range. Kelvin Banks, 325. I think this offensive line is built to have success in the SEC in the run game. This is an offensive line. Look, as good a season as Christian Jones had last year, and congratulations on having a great Senior Bowl and Combine, Cam Williams is going to lean on people in the run game in a little different way next year. So this Texas offensive line is built by Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian for this move to the SEC. They're physically ready for it in the run game. I don't worry about this offensive line in the run game from end zone to 15. Now, red zone, we'll see what Sark and those guys come up with. Pass pro is where everything's going to be determined. But size-wise, they're ready to go compete with the best in the SEC.
Yeah, that's about a 40-pound increase from Christian Jones to Cam Williams that is expected on that Texas offensive line in 2024. Quite a bit of weight. But I also wanted to hit on, kind of the parity that we're seeing at the offensive line. You talk about Brandon Baker coming in at 297, Trevor Goosby now at 310, but then you got fellows like Connor Stroh at 370, Andre Kojo at 350, and Peyton Kirkland at 362. I mean, it's kind of all over the map, kind of just picking and plugging exactly where you need these pieces to be. Luckily, Texas has the physicalness to match maybe some of those quote-unquote undersized guys right now when you consider the big human trend that we're seeing in Austin.
Yeah, so Connor Stroh's interesting because I bet when it comes playing time for him, and I do think he'll probably be the backup right guard this year, 360. Look, but the thing with Connor is he's just one of those big guys because he's arguably the strongest guy in the program in terms of weight room. And his body's changed. It's reshaped, but he's just a large human. I mean, he is the largest of large humans. The crazy thing is Jaden Chapman was 303 at the roster last year. He's 294 now. Yeah. So very athletic mover, a guy that Texas really likes. The backup centers, both over 300 pounds. I mean, CJ, it might be before your time a little bit, but there was a time where Chris Hall started and Texas fans were pulling their hair out because he was a 270-pound center. Well, Texas has 4 centers over 300 pounds right now when you add Daniel Cruz into the mix. So I just love where this offensive line is at. And Trevor Goosby obviously has made huge gains in terms of his strength and weight and can continue to grow since he's been in the program. And you look at guys, Cole Hudson. I mean, that's a good 305, 310 pounds for him. So I really like where this program is at on the offensive line. I think the work that Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian have done has been amazing. And I really believe you're going to start to see that work come to fruition this season because it's year 3 for Kelvin Banks, right? It's year 3 for Cole Hudson, Connor Robertson, DJ Campbell, Cam Williams. That was the class that the change in the program was built on.
Absolutely.
And you can point to that for the entire program. That offensive line class signaled change for University of Texas football. And now these guys are getting in the year 3. Kelvin Banks will be a first-round pick. He has a healthy junior season. Cam Williams, DJ Campbell. There's multiple draft picks from that class. Neto, we haven't even mentioned, who's going to be fighting for the left guard spot. He's up to 334 from 311. And I haven't seen Neto a lot. I guarantee you that's good weight on Neto. Yeah. He's just now in competition with Zena. I mean, so the competition's back, right? But this offensive line, first 3, like you said, the depth across the board is getting right where Texas wants it. And this 2022 class was huge in changing the trajectory of the program.
Yeah, if Zena's coming in at 255 as an early enrollee, you know that weight for NATO is going to be prime. Exactly. One other point on the offensive line before we get into a quick recruiting question on the offensive line. Malik Agbo still listed as an offensive lineman, north of 305 or 300 pounds. So sitting right at 303, 304, right in that range. Interestingly, that he is not necessarily designated as a tight end as many kind of anticipated or theorized about. He still obviously will be used in that hybrid kind of 6-man offensive line tight end we saw over the past couple of years. But going into kind of the world of recruiting when it comes to the offensive line and Kyle Flood's philosophy of finding big humans, is it what's that balance of finding talented players, but guys that still fit the mold of, having some good weight? You talk about Michael Vasusi, Nick Brooks, Tyler Thomas, John Mills, some of these bigger body guys that you're seeing schedule those official visits. Is there a certain, kind of approach that you've seen through Kyle Flood's recruiting?
Yeah. So I think the one thing is, like Brandon Baker, similar to him. Brandon, they all aren't 330 pounds coming out of high school, right? Brandon Baker was probably 280, 282 when he committed to Texas. And you're seeing that with a guy like Jonte Newman. The tackles, the crazy thing is the tackles, it's still all about the bend, the feet, the bend, the body quickness. I mean, that's what this position's still about, with enough arm length, not wingspan, but arm length. Kyle Flood in Texas don't care about the wingspan number. That's used a lot because it's easier when you go to camps. It's the arm length number. But, all these guys don't have to be 6'3" or have to be 320 pounds coming out of high school. That athleticism at the tackle position still has to be number one with the arm length, and then they can build up that frame. I think what you're seeing in 25, John Mills kind of falls in line with what Texas has recruited on the interior. Tyler Thomas is a 6'5", 325-pound guy, right? Fasusi has more of that tackle build, that Brandon Baker build. He's bigger than Baker by 15 pounds at the same time, but he's a guy who's going to be more Kelvin Banks size, 6'5", 325 when all is said and done. That athleticism carries the weight on the edge. You got to have body quickness to play tackle at a high level. In the SEC and in the NFL. Interior-wise, I think more size for that inside zone run game. I think that is big. So it's never a shock to see the guards bigger than the tackles. I think in an ideal world for Texas, it wouldn't have not shocked me if Cam Williams was a right guard if they had somebody else at right tackle.
Yeah. He was worked there last spring a little bit, trying to get him, in the field, finding a way to get him involved and on the roster. If you find your overall best 5, I think Texas was trying to get him in that fold just a little bit. Last question, but Jerry, we've seen the name Byron Murphy often, and Byron Washington out of DeSoto, the big-bodied left tackle there. Texas was interested for a little bit. They're still kind of toying around, swimming around the waters a little bit for Byron Washington. But there's now another prospect that has a similar build out of Euless Trinity in the 26 class, Pupunkatua Katoa. And I'm going to I'm going to mess this name up for the rest of the
Hopefully you have to for the next 6 years. So
exactly. But a similar guy, 6'5", 380 pounds, 385 pounds. When you evaluate the tape, and you kind of evaluate that similar size build with other guys that we've seen at that weight, what is it about Katoa that stands out and kind of differentiates himself from that size guys that we've seen in the past?
Yeah, so Byron Washington is too big, right? A great kid, plays really hard. He's got to watch his weight. I mean, he's legitimately almost 6'8". I mean, you're talking about a guy that's 400 plus pounds. I mean, you can't play effectively there. I think Katoa is a better athlete on a football field than a guy like Byron Washington. Katoa's got quickness. He's got initial quickness, power to him, hands, legs, the hips, all of it. Everything's powerful with him, but with enough quickness. So that is that's the thing I look at with him. And I think 365 pounds long term is probably where he'll play at in the college game, in the Power 5 game. And obviously, we brought him up. He's going to be on campus. It's April 13th, CJ. April 13th is the day for him. Then you have John Turntine in 26, who fits more that Fasusi, Kelvin Banks tackle mode, where Katoa is an inside guy. Turntine's is maybe the best tackle in the country in 26. He's coming in either April 6th or the 13th.
Yeah. Right now, that April 13th window is looking like they'll try to get some out-of-state 25s and then focus some on the in-state 26s as well. 3 offensive linemen scheduled to come in on that weekend. So really, again, the offensive line is very intriguing to me, and we've seen it's been the night and day difference of this Texas program since this staff's arrival, and it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. But I mean, that's a great note to end on, I would say, Jerry. Any last comments, anything that sticks out to you off of this roster update?
Yeah, I said it on the Longhorn live stream Friday, but this has the roster of a team that will be a contender to be in the playoffs. This is what 3 straight top 5 classes with really good deep sea fishing work in the portal look like for a blue blood program. This is the way it's supposed to look like if you're going to be competing in the SEC at the highest level, and a team that people look at year in, year out to have a shot to make the 12-team playoff. You have quarterback, you have a number 1 quarterback, you have a tremendous QB2 that will be a tremendous QB1 behind him. You have depth at running back, at 2 excellent freshman running backs. You have depth all across the board. You have big-time freshmen at wide receiver and Ryan Wingo. You have guys that are going to factor in the return game. And then your offensive line, it looks like it's ready to compete in SEC. The defensive line, size-wise, is there. I think they'll get somebody else in the portal with more adult in the room size that has a lot of experience at the Power 5 level. But that, Dre Bledsoe adding weight. You see what Sadir Mitchell looks like. We're hoping that's a typo, honestly, but we're hoping that they meant 352 or 342, right? But the Texas, Dre Bledsoe gaining weight, Aaron Bryant gaining weight, all these guys, Vernon Broughton over 300 pounds, all these guys, this is the way the roster's supposed to look like if you're going to compete for SEC and in the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, year in and year out. Let's consider that with the 12-team playoff as well. So again, one of those days where you get to look at the new roster and come away some really, I would say, encouraging conclusions from this Texas roster and the way that it's built going into spring football. Again, as you said, the last 4 or 5 months, it's going to be the most anticipated Texas spring practice in a long, long time. But until spring ball begins, make sure to go follow us and join the community on Texas football. We'll have a lot of recruiting visit updates. Just locked in Elijah Bo Barnes for June 21st through 23rd. Jerry broke that news earlier Friday night. So a lot going on right now. Busy time, and it's only going to get busier with spring ball cooking up. So go ahead and join us. And until next time, we'll be sure to keep you all updated. But this has been On Texas Football Saturday edition. Welcome.